So we had to, for the first time ever, I reached out to our estate planning attorney and said, yo, like, do you have a recommendation for an eviction lawyer or a real estate lawyer that handles evictions?
Because this was in August, September, but we tried to work with her for a long time.
We tried to work with her in August, and we tried to work with her in September.
Right. Dude, we are back with another episode of Me and You. But today,
talk story kind things.
Yeah,
the not so glamorous side of owning residential real estate
in landlord not friendly
in
landlord
tenant
states.
friendly states.
Tenant friendly states.
AKA
Hawaii,
Hawaii,
California. There's a bunch of them, but
so I mean, honestly, if you don't have an emotional tie to a state that is not landlord friendly, I highly recommend not buying in those states.
right.
But if you do, like us, where we love this place, we're from this place, and we want to own property in this place,
Right.
then this is some shit you're gonna have to deal with.
Well, it is, and I think this is the uncomfortable part of like just creating content too, is talking about the things that actually go wrong that nobody talks about, right?
Especially, I think it's funny that we always decided to record this content, but yesterday on the news, a landlord actually died at the hands of their tenant he was trying to evict.
A landlord in Hawaii was going to his apartment that he had rented out.
Now, I don't know
all the logistics.
Right. All I know is that the tenant killed the landlord.
This is the story, though, right? And that came out on the news. He went over to evict one of the tenants. The tenant's boyfriend was there, got involved, beat up the landlord. The landlord lady later died. So this is like craziness.
And that's not every day. That doesn't normally happen, but it's just the irony in us deciding to talk about evictions, you know, setting this date and saying we're going to talk about evictions. I even want to get our lawyer on here. He's a very busy guy, but I would still love to get him on here because that's what he does every day. And I think it would be highly educational and informative.
Valuable.
Yeah, for people just to understand the process, because even as we went through it, you know, I learned things and I can't recap things in as much detail as I think he could and explain things in a manner that he could. So we'll try to get him on here, but in the meantime, we're going to talk about how we just evicted a non-paying tenant from one of our units.
And I think why this topic is so hard to talk about is it is a sensitive thing, right?
100%.
Because there's two sides to the story.
Well, there's three sides of every story, right?
Right. Well, yeah, but I mean, they're like in this situation, like you have a tenant that isn't paying rent, and then you have a landlord like us who has a mortgage that they have to pay.
And I think that's important, that we're just going to come from the perspective of being the owner of the property, having to have the responsibility of that property, both monetarily and physically. And we're only going to come from that perspective. So don't come for us if you're like, feel otherwise. Like, just watch something else.
Go watch something else right now. But we want to talk about the process, how it was, and yeah, let's go.
Okay, so we own 2 units in the same building, and at the beginning of COVID, there was a program that was helping people get into property, and it was basically a rental government assisted program.
Right.
And the whole
isn't it basically taking people off the streets?
Yeah, and providing them support so
Right.
that they can be independent and sustainable within housing, and
Totally.
provide them case management, provide them employment support, and all the things.
Right.
So if you actually abided by the system and the guidelines put in place by the program, it would set you up for success. And it even tries to transition you onto long-term housing support like a Section 8. And
the reason we were open to it is because this aligns.
I come from that world.
Right.
That's my passion.
This aligns with everything that we want to do with Hawaii and property. We want to help.
We'll continue doing it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
We want to help people with affordable rentals, with giving them a shot off of the street.
Right.
And helping get them on their feet.
Bridge the gap in affordable housing. Bridge the gap in this housing crisis that people are saying exists and we know exists, but we're trying to be a solution, not a problem.
Right.
From our lens, you know? And yeah, I mean, coming from a behavioral health background, majority, 95, maybe 98% of my client base that I used to serve and still do, that's who I want to help.
Right.
That's who I want to see get into housing. And I think that there's a bad stigma of, low income housing and Section 8 housing, and
they're gonna wreck your spot. They're not gonna take care of it. And I think that's
the minority.
Right.
Not the majority. Majority of people on Section 8 and landlords that offer their housing to Section 8, if they're not slumlords and they actually give a shit, they're great tenants. There is a thing called pride of rentership. There is a thing. And I'm a firm believer in having a beautiful space and a safe space allows you to flourish and heal and be productive in other areas of your life.
Right.
So all of that is why we supported the program and want to do the program. And it benefits landlords and it benefits tenants. And we're all about win-win situations. So we did it. We did it for both of our units. We have a unit on the 8th floor and we have a unit on the 5th floor. 5th floor, amazing. She went through the program. She got employment. She transitioned to Section 8 exactly how it's supposed to be. She's an amazing paying tenant. She gives me no grief. She's a great lady.
Right.
Right? The opposite was for our 8th floor.
Well, it was good in the beginning while she was relying on
while she
the program.
Didn't have to pull her end of the bargain.
Right.
And I think there was a failure on our part to properly screen the tenant. So it ultimately, the situation that we landed ourselves in with having to go through eviction,
it's our fault.
It all falls on us.
It always does.
It does not make the actions of a non-paying tenant okay, in my opinion, but it's our fault. Right. For not screening them properly. Anyway, so we signed actually a 13-month lease, not a 12-month lease, and things were going good up until about August of September of 2022, where basically the COVID money had run out, and that program was saying, we only planned for 2 years. And these clients we've given them all our resources. They're supposed to transition. They're supposed to be able to sustain their rent on their own at this point.
Right.
One successfully did it. The other did not. She stopped paying rent altogether. Right. Just $0 kept coming in. And so we tried to work with her, right? We tried to do cash for keys, multiple attempts on the door, nothing.
Right.
No response. No cooperation, no communication, nothing. So we had to, for the first time ever, I reached out to our estate planning attorney and said, do you have a recommendation for an eviction lawyer or a real estate lawyer that handles evictions?
Because this was in August, September, and we tried to work with her for a long time.
We tried to work with her in August and we tried to work with her in September.
Right.
And September we got no rent. I'm pretty sure we got no rent. October we for 100% got no rent. And it was in October that I said, this isn't working. It's been 2 months. Mind you, we have a mortgage on that property.
Right.
So it's not like it's free and clear and we can afford. Not only do we have a mortgage, there's also an HOA. It's in a building, so there's an association fee tied to it.
Right.
So we're now negative months and months and months and months of rent. And
while
HOAs.
At the same time, our tenant is working and just deciding to not pay rent.
In the unit.
Right.
So in Hawaii, you cannot just knock on the door and say you haven't paid rent. You need to get out. No, you can't do that. That's completely illegal. I know people that do, and that's fine. And honestly, I would love to do that, but you just, unfortunately, you can't.
Right.
So we got in touch with a lawyer who his name is Andrew Stewart. Great guy.
Shout out Andrew Stewart.
Please be on our podcast.
Yes.
You're amazing. I'm going to convince you to talk
Walked
evictions.
us through the entire process.
Because it had been our first time.
We didn't know. We didn't know what we didn't know.
So you have to give notice to your tenant that they haven't paid. Like you basically have like you have 15 days to pay or you have to get out. And get out means like you actually don't have to get out. You have to get evicted. Anyway, so you have to serve them saying like, yo, you didn't pay. So we had to go through that process. Once you go through that process and then they still don't pay, then you can start the process to what's called an eviction lawsuit. Now, our lawyer, a retainer to hire a lawyer on average is several $1,000s. So not only are you out your mortgage on your HOA every single month because you have a non-paying tenant. In addition, you have to foot a bill for a retainer. Ours costs $5,000.
Right. And I know we talked a little bit about it, but we are in a very tenant-friendly state. So, guys, our state tries to do everything to keep the tenant in the property, even though they have been non-paying. And they make the process for us to legally evict this person very, very arduous and long.
It's just long.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to go through multiple steps. So once we hired the retainer in like the middle end of November, then we could start the process. So that's when so September, October, we're still trying to work with her. I'm trying to get an attorney. We hired the attorney in November. Then, of course, you have to do the 15-day notice, and then you have to file the lawsuit for eviction.
Yep.
Then you have to get a court date. So you file the lawsuit, and then you still have to wait until you get a hearing.
Right.
She and our lawyer showed up at the hearing.
Yes. And how long was that?
I don't really...
Isn't it like a month?
It was like a month.
Yeah.
It was like a month. I don't think we got a court date until middle of December. And it's weird when it's all around the holiday season because... Dude, everybody just stops. Everybody just goes on vacation. Everybody just has delays. You know what I mean? So it just makes things harder.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to scroll through all my correspondence with him.
Yeah. So middle of December, we get the court date, the first court date. Our tenant actually shows up at court. There was a scenario where we had that court date. Our tenant doesn't show up, and the judge grants us the ability for a writ of possession. But because our tenant showed up and was fighting the lawsuit, basically.
So she showed up, and what happened was they made us go to mediation. And they did that. They set up a trust account with the court system that basically told the tenant, you need to pay X number of dollars by this day to the courts, not even to us.
Right.
To a trust account set up by the judicial system, by the court system. And if you don't, then what can happen is they can file what's called an immediate writ of possession.
Right.
And so they made us go to mediation.
Of course, mediation is set for a month out too.
Yeah.
Right.
So you show up on mediation, and essentially, I mean, you and I want nothing from this person but to vacate the unit so that we can get a new tenant, a solid tenant, a vetted tenant in there to start paying again.
Right.
That's why we buy real estate, is for a tenant to rent it out and have cash flow.
Right.
Not negative cash flow.
Right.
So, dude, that's all we wanted. We don't want anything from her.
Right. I think what's important to note, especially in these tenant-friendly states, is that the judges, even though COVID is long overdue, like
in
it's
the
done
federal
already,
system, it's
right?
not.
It's not. Like, people still realize that, well, the federal government still feels like there are things that are blocking people because of COVID, and COVID is still very real and an issue. So they're trying to do everything they can to prolong these things. Honestly, it comes down to, so mediation in the mediation, they want us to come to an agreement and her stay in or our tenant stay in the property.
Right. And I get in some situations why it's effective and why it works, but in this one, it just didn't.
Right.
And so we showed up to mediation as scheduled, and guess who did not?
Tenant did not show up.
Tenant did not show up. So what that meant was, on top of mediation, we still had that other procedure in place where she had a deadline to pay a certain amount to the court system into their, I forget what it was called, but it was some type of trust account. And
she didn't do that either.
She didn't do that either. But after mediation, we still had to wait for that date. So you're still waiting to see if she's going to do, or the tenant is still going to do something.
Right.
She did not do that. So after that is when you can file a writ of possession. And that still doesn't get processed in 24 hours.
Right.
I feel like it was about a week. And then you have to serve. And then she has to get out. But there's still a process in that too.
Yeah.
So ultimately that's what happened. There was no compliance on her part instructions given to her by the judge she did not comply with. And therefore we didn't have to go through the full eviction process, and it wasn't drawn out even further. We had to basically stop at a writ of possession, wait for that. That got issued, and then we were able to hire a servicer. And that's something that I would also recommend, is to hire an attorney and to hire a servicer. Do get sheriffs involved. Don't try and do it on your own, because
bad things can happen,
as evidenced by the thing on the news.
Right.
But also just because you want somebody to back you up and know the laws, and you want to do things as up and up as possible in the event, especially if you have multiple properties. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, for sure. I think that obviously you need to have everything recorded, right?
Yeah,
and everything has to be done legally, obviously. And yeah, I mean, you just don't know what you don't know. So the lawyer is the way. But what's important to note is that, okay, this process for us took this long, but it could have been drawn out for a year easily. If our tenant had showed up to mediation and expressed interest in trying to mediate the situation, and she paid into that trust account and she kept showing up to court, we would have got drawn out and drawn out and drawn out. So
right.
Our process from start to finish was...
So she stopped paying. She owed us about $4,800 in rent. We hadn't received rent from her since, and we received her, rent from a portion from the program she was on in September, but nothing from her. Full responsibility became on her part in October, so we hadn't received anything from her until October. We didn't get our unit back until, give me a second.
March, sometime in March.
No, I think it was February.
Really?
Yeah, until March 1st.
Yeah.
And so that was a speedy one. That was a fast eviction.
Right.
From October, technically, to March. So
right.
November, December, January, February. 5 months.
Right. I mean, from when we initiated the eviction, though, it was like November to March.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 4.
So a very fast process, I would say, for such a, our state, which is a tenant-friendly state. But like I said, she stopped cooperating. And so the judge saw that and was like, okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So.
And then, so what happens, how you get your property back is the server or the sheriffs go. And once you have written possession legally, they go and they're the ones that remove the tenant from the unit.
Right. And I think it goes, technically, once you have that, you can go and it's yours. You can take it back now. We elected to give her 28 or 48 hours.
Yeah.
Once we
To
had
get her
that
stuff
writ
out,
to get all of her stuff out,
Mm-hmm.
and you know what I mean? That was just it. So we gave her 48 hours. We got it back. We were then able to change the locks,
Right.
And do all the things and start the process of, finding a new tenant.
So, I mean, we technically got rid of possession on like the February 25th or 26th, and we got her officially out on March 1st.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just the process. It is stressful. It caused me a lot of stress because you're out essentially $5,000, but we're not just out $5,000. We're out $5,000 for rent plus another $5,000 for going through the eviction process.
Right.
So this whole thing costs $10,000, which as a landlord, if you don't have that cushion somewhere, that could be detrimental.
Yeah.
To you. You could even start going into foreclosure because you're talking about 5 or 6 months of no mortgage. I still have to pay the mortgage. What if somebody relies on that one unit to pay for that property? You're now 6 months behind and you're in foreclosure.
Yeah.
On top of being in debt to try and pay for a lawyer to evict. What if you can't afford a lawyer? I just think of all these things, and it's unfortunate. Whereas I know in like other states like Florida, you can literally show up just almost same day.
Well, I mean, yeah,
almost same day.
You
like
still have to go through a process, but it's a very fast, easy, quick process.
right,
Right.
Not a 5 month, 6 month,
Or a year, 2 year. I've heard people that have had tenants in there and could not evict them for years. So, it is something that we have to. It's a price we pay for wanting to own property in our backyard here because we're in a tenant-friendly state.
And again,
but I think
non-paying tenants are the minority. There's tons of amazing tenants.
Yeah, I mean the other thing to note here is that we're all about helping people, right? So like if
we're just gonna throw another Section 8 tenant right back in there.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
So if our tenants are willing to work with us, we are willing to work with them. Like 100%. 100%. So it was an unfortunate situation, but like we wanted to talk about it because we wanted to educate other people about this is what happens.
Well, it's the not glamorous side that doesn't get talked about.
Right.
Evicting tenants and having to go in debt $10,000 to get control of your property back, so you can. Yeah, it needs to get talked about more. I know that it's our first eviction. It's probably not going to be our last. But the moral of the story is be aware that if you're going to own property in Hawaii, this could happen. You can't just go and show up at the door and kick somebody out.
The other side of it is
the second is vet
right.
your tenant thoroughly.
Right.
Ask all the hard questions. Get a property manager that is super experienced, because back when we initially were trying to stabilize these assets and fill them with renters,
these were one of our first few rentals. That's why.
Yeah, you just don't know what you don't
right.
know, and we were self-managing. I was paying a friend to just help me be an intermediary, and we were just navigating it as it came, and we no longer are doing that. Right. You know what I mean? So vet your tenants thoroughly. Do background checks. Do credit checks. Verify everything. Ask for resources. Do all the things, because in the end, vetting them thoroughly in the beginning and doing all that hard, tedious tasks up front will help you in the long run, so you don't have to go through the eviction process that we just went through.
Right. Yeah. So if you guys have any questions, please put them in the comments down below.
Yep.
We are all about wanting to share
good, bad, and ugly.
Right. The things that nobody likes to talk about, but are such an important piece to a real estate business. And hopefully you guys got some value out of that.
If you know anyone that is looking to rent, we have a unit now. Again, it's beautiful. It's renovated. It's affordable. We are open to Section 8, all the programs. Let us know. If you like content like this and you want to see more of it, like, subscribe, follow, share.
It helps us reach more people and helps us, make more content. So we appreciate you guys.
Time to get paid, blow. Time to get paid. Time to get paid, blow up like I'm blowing.